Shall we begin? Let's begin now. Let's begin now.
This is not a drill.
Repeat, this is not a drill.
Craig Pasta-Jardula. You'll recognize him from hosting the Jimmy Dore Show while Jimmy's on tour.
I always say, tell me one thing that Joe Biden has done better than Donald Trump. Tell me one friggin' thing. Joe Biden's going to do the whole student debt thing. No, he's not. Student loan freeze is ending. Prepare to pay up starting August 30th. Joe Biden had a chance. He had leverage when he went to talk about the debt stealing. He didn't get it done with McCarthy. He couldn't get it done with McCarthy, but he still made sure there was a pipeline of money to go to Ukraine
Thank
war
God.
and any other war they want. But student loan forgiveness,
it was worth it because they're winning.
that was their crown jewel. Didn't get it done. How many people has Joe Biden been guilty of killing?
That's right.
Joe Biden was for every single war, including the Iraq war. He was a senator with the Democrats, and he's the one who brought it to the table for George W. Bush to have his illegal war. Maui fire victims faced evictions and cutoffs. Can you imagine this? The fact that they're sending all this money, they're arguing to send all this money to Ukraine, and they won't even help these people out. They don't have money to help the citizens who lost everything, but they have money to fund war. We're going to be here every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And now remember, it's time for Pasta to Go. Welcome to the show, everybody. Craig Pasta Jardula is here. It is Pasta to Go, LOL time, which is left on left criticism of sorts or critiquing. And it's where the left laughs out loud to keep ourselves from crying because it is nuts out there, especially for leftists nowadays. United States has this kind of like American left, when we go over the seas. And I'll be going to Nicaragua soon, too, as well. And hopefully Venezuela. We're still in a holding pattern. We're going to see what's going on. I want to observe their election. I think it's really important. So we're going to need your help to get us some boots on the ground, as you always do. I can't thank you enough. So there's a lot of stuff in the future. So today is the LOL show, as you know. This LOL segment, left on left criticism, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep itself from crying, will be played on WBAI in New York, and also on Gary Knowles Progressive News Radio. And we're going to be trying to send some of this over, hopefully maybe on the weekends. If they like, Sputnik can put it on their weekend stuff. So we got a lot in the can. We got a lot in the holster or in the chamber, whatever you want to say. A lot of fun stuff going on. And I want to thank you all for supporting. Guys, if you do want to help out the show, all the links are down below in ways you can help independent media get our boots on the ground. We don't do no armchair journalists here. We make sure we go to the people. And today's show is going to be a lot of fun. As you know, we covered the Libertarian Convention in Washington, D.C. We interviewed the candidates. We saw the fights on the floor. We saw the speeches, the politicians that showed up. We were able to really capture the moment in one of the best conventions I'd seen yet. Jayme, I know you're there, CheeseSlice on the ones and twos, but before we get started with this segment, can you give us your opinion on what you felt, how you felt about the Libertarian Convention real quick? Because you had a lot to say about it.
Oh, yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. It was very well organized, and I thought, it was just really disparaging to watch it because I know there's nothing like that for the left. So the Libertarians put on a very, very good convention, and it's everything about it was something to be jealous of. They looked like it was a professional organization. And they had their rules. They followed their rules. They got their candidates by using their process. We could talk about whether or not that process was flawed or not. But the fact is they did everything by the book. They didn't just have a bunch of people go into a back room and select their candidate like the Democratic Party does. Yeah. So I was very impressed. I thought they did a fantastic job putting that thing together. And I'm very happy we got to go there and witness it firsthand. It was a lot of fun, too, just to be there.
You said something interesting, and you're right. Very transparent. And I said this is actually a grassroots movement where the people can actually obtain power right here. I mean, and I think we'll have some comments and talk about that because today's guest will be ter Maat from the Libertarian Party. We're going to introduce him to all those things. He is the vice presidential candidate. He just eked out the vice president vote. Very, very small. We're going to talk about all that fun stuff. But to me, what was great, it was a perfect case study on, hey, sometimes the guy who knocks on the most doors, the guy who works the hardest, the guy who brings his you-know-what together to the convention is going to win. And I think that's what the case was for Chase Oliver. And ter Maat finished a close second. Even in the debate, I felt he finished a close second. But Jayme, just one thing I want to point out before we get on into the show is that you said there's nothing like that for leftists. I think the question we were asking ourselves is there a spot for leftist libertarians in this party? I don't know about the leadership role, but they're very open to a lot of our ideas. And even with Mike ter Maat coming on today, we're going to share some of the ideas that leftists and libertarians actually agree on.
There was a lot of overlap.
What's that, buddy?
There was definitely a lot of overlap there, and but that makes sense because the libertarians and leftists, they just in general, where there was a segment of the political compass where you can see there's just an overlap in that bottom left corner because. So I think, but there are definitely big differences in opinions on other issues too. That can be a deal breaker for a lot of people. So,
well, we're gonna do 2 24-minute shows. I'm gonna go on the radio inside New York, and the first one
get back to
about the things we agree on, those leftist ideologies. Thank you so much, Jayme. We're gonna talk about the border, the immigration, the whole 9 yards, and then we're gonna talk about the things we disagree on, which is libertarian economics. Which I know he's probably laughing in the background as he heard that. But we could talk about these things. I think there's a misconception of economics from the libertarian point of view. People think that they lack compassion, that they just want to have rules in there that which they can enrich themselves. No, I said this before, and I think I made a tweet about this. I said everybody on the left in America wants to make sure that everybody can have health care, where the libertarians want to make sure that the government can't poison you, that you'll need that health care. So it's a good observation. We're going to jump into it. I got my partner, my man on the side. Here we go. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is LOL, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep itself from crying. I am your host, Craig Pasta Jardula, the captain. And of course, with me today, my co-host, the professor himself, Jayme Kuzmarov, is here. He is a professor at Tulsa Community College, but he also is an author of many books, including his new book you can see right behind him if you're watching at home, ladies and gentlemen, Warmonger, a story about the Clintons. Professor, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to a good discussion.
So am I. Let's try to keep calm. Let's try to hear this man's point of view before we start jumping on his throat, because I think a lot of people have a misconception about libertarians. And we're going to dive right into it. We're going to talk about the things we agree on as far as populist left and libertarians. We're going to talk about the things we disagree about. We're going to have a great show. So let's just jump right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, Mike ter Maat, is here with us.
It's so good to be with you. But I got to ask you, if you're in the waiting area, right? Mm-hmm. You're in the electronic green room, and the host is saying, we got some stuff in the can. Does that mean I'm the one in the can? Like, are you in the holster? Are you in the chamber? Were you referring to me? Is that how that works?
Well, as you can see, the Libertarian candidate for vice president definitely has a sense of humor. Yes, Mr. Mike ter Maat, you are the bullet in the can, in the holster. You are the actual piece of material today, the entertainment. That is you, sir.
I appreciate that. Let's find out if I'm a slug or buckshot. What's your first question?
All right, let's get into it. Slug or buckshot? Ladies and gentlemen, please go to his Twitter and you can find out all the information if you want to help out the campaign or if you just want to learn more about Mike ter Maat, the vice presidential candidate. Let's jump right into it. Okay, Mike, is it safe to say that most libertarians have a non-interventionist attitude when it comes to foreign policy across the board?
Absolutely. We believe that that is the case and should be the case for two different reasons. And I'll give you two different reasons to agree with me or disagree with me, depending on your attitude today. But I think that two very different things need to be said. Number one, American foreign policy simply no longer aligns with the ethics and underlying values of the American public. And you know this because our leaders make decisions that you wouldn't make, right? You wouldn't decide to go into Iraq and Afghanistan, stay there in 20 years, right? Blow off trillions of dollars, cause the deaths of most Americans refuse to realize this and internalize this, over 1 million human beings. These are not decisions that you would make. And so for this reason, I believe that Americans are waking up to the fact that our foreign policy, which uses your money to project power abroad, and largely for no other reason than to per se maintain military hegemony, maintain control over the world. This simply does not align with our values. And the second thing I think that needs to be said is that it doesn't work. As a practical matter, U.S. federal government foreign policy does not make us safer, does not put us further and further away from the possibility of World War III, but actually increases the number of possibilities out there of it coming to pass. And I think more Americans are waking up to that idea as well.
Professor, do you have any follow-up there?
What is your position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and how do you see the U.S. getting out of that?
It's a tough one, right? I wish that we weren't in it. I wish that we hadn't been providing money to Ukraine. But to peel the onion back further, I wish that we hadn't been doing some of the stupid stuff we've been doing over the past 35 years to push. Look, if I accidentally say anything that leads you to believe that I'm tolerant of Vladimir Putin, I have misspoken, okay? This is a bad guy, no matter how you define a bad guy. He's bad for the world. He's bad for the Russian economy. He's bad for military interventionism. I think that he's an ethical problem. I wish he had never come to power. And he's running one of the few governments in the world that makes ours look super smart, okay? But having said that, there's no denying that U.S. federal government policy over the past 35 years has contributed to the ability of the Russian government to, in some sense, at least in their own minds, for the purposes of domestic politics, justified, right, this incursion into Ukraine, this war with Ukraine, this invasion of Ukraine. You cannot have this discussion without acknowledging that the United States has played a role. I'm not suggesting that it's our fault, right? But we have made a contribution in what I would suggest is the wrong direction. Okay. Having said that, we need to get out of it. We need to negotiate our way out of it. I believe you can. You have to threaten Moscow with us putting in more resources. You have to threaten Ukrainians with us, pulling resources. So you got to speak out of both sides of your mouth. But you've got to pressure these people to come to a negotiated settlement as quickly as possible. And we should not be in it. And make no mistake, we're at war today.
Okay, let's get a little pushback here, because I didn't think I'd disagree with you this early in the show, but I have to right off the bat. Some of the stuff you said about Vladimir Putin would sound like it was coming out of John Bolton's mouth or Pompeo's mouth. I mean, the truth of the matter is we had Minsk 1 and 2. We had 8 years of them try to come to some agreement. So why can we play? It was almost like what you said there, Mr. ter Maat, was a little fence sitting, right? Putin's all this bad, but we got to look at what we have done. How can we simply not say that what Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation has done, by the way, it's a government, there's an actual Congress, a parliament that they have to go to and seek permission to do so. It's not just some authoritarian going into Russia because he feels like expanding the old Soviet Union. But with all our actions, especially we know with Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pyatt, that we forced the color revolution. And if you do your homework, and I know a lot of libertarians know their history, you would see since 1991, we've been trying to force a color revolution in Ukraine because of that, the nature of that country split in two. So why do we get to have this kind of fence-sitting mentality? And I've had my problem, not just with you, with other libertarians, to sit there and go, Putin is bad, Putin is awful. It seems like we're trying to justify or protect our libertarian ideology when it comes to civil liberties, and guys like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are bad. How can we have any accusations towards them when you even admitted yourself it's all about our actions which have led to this Ukraine-Russia war? Please go right ahead.
Well, I'll tell you what, I won't put words in your mouth and you won't put them in mine. This is not all our responsibility. I believe that we have pursued a crappy foreign policy. By the way, I'm the one that said that we've done things wrong over the past 35 years first, not you. So a little credit, please. The reason I hasten to add that Vladimir Putin is a bad actor is not because I think it's necessarily the most important fact in this, but it is an important piece of this puzzle. And if you leave it out, all kinds of people will accuse you of not recognizing that. But it is true. Putin is an aggressor. By the way, I'm not sure I completely buy into your characterization of the Russian government. Factually speaking, you're right. they have a Congress, right, with a lowercase c. They have a government with a lowercase g. I get all that, but that doesn't mean it's not authoritarian. Okay, it's quite concentrated with power, as is the American government. I'm not suggesting that we're not, but the Russian government is even more authoritarian than ours, and I think that that's an important fact to recognize.
Really? Because I don't see them mandating a vaccine the way we did over here. I don't see them censoring people left and right the way they are over here. And at the end of the day, I'm not disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is, it seems like when we talk about the badness, the shame on Vladimir Putin, we are actually trying to manufacture consent to get involved and stay involved. And all I'm trying to say is that no matter what, at the end of the day, it's up to the Russian people to decide what government they want to have. It's up to the Chinese people to decide what government they have. And I understand that the libertarian mindset is anti-socialism, anti-communism, doesn't like too much power and control. But really, to tell you the truth, isn't this a situation where we have 1,000 bases outside the United States and Russia has 4 or 5? We have that 1,000 bases, China has 3. Isn't it really time for us to say we have to stop looking at these people and saying, but this, but that? Because it seems to me that's what the mainstream media wants. That's what the government wants. They want to find some loophole where they can manufacture consent for their own justifications for interference and getting involved. When I think, just plain and simple, we need to look 100% at ourselves.
Yes.
Thank you.
Does that make you feel better? Yes, everything you said is true.
Yeah.
But at the end, I think you might take too large a bite of the apple when you say 100%, right? It's not true that the United States is the only government that is responsible for conflict in Ukraine. I can't buy into that. And I don't mean that you necessarily meant that either. But,
I just meant that we're the main reason, and that's what we have to judge.
We are an important reason, and we're the one reason that our government can control, right?
Yeah.
Where you and I would agree, we can argue about semantics and, 38% versus 83%. That's not what we're talking about in the main. What we're talking about is that our foreign policy sucks, and we need to change it.
Yeah. Listen, you have a hard task. And I know a lot of people in your party. Like I said, I've built this coalition, and I've always felt that people like in high positions within your party have to maintain their somewhat libertarian values and saying, no, listen, at the end of the day, we might be the main cause or the main agitator, but they're authoritarian. They're suppressing people's speech, and the libertarians.
That doesn't strike me as all that hard, though. I mean, those just happen to be. If Ukraine had been invaded by the United Kingdom, to bring up an odd possibility, right? Just as a thought experiment, then I think, we might have a difficulty, saying certain things, but that didn't happen. The truth is that Ukraine was invaded by a government that was provoked by bad American government policy. That doesn't mean that the government in Moscow is not authoritarian.
I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying it doesn't make a difference. That's their government. They had every right to defend themselves. 8 years of Minsk 1 and 2, killing Russians on the ethnic border. I mean, I'm just trying to say it doesn't even matter in my mind, Mike. That's just my personal opinion.
I agree with you, and I agree wholeheartedly with your attitude. As a matter of fact, just like you have invited me to stop, saying how horrible and authoritarian the Moscow government is, I would invite you to stop saying that the Russian government, in effect, you didn't say exactly this, don't get me wrong, but you kind of feel like you're saying they were justified. I would have invaded Ukraine too. And I think that might be a bridge too far.
I am saying that, but we can disagree.
Okay, we can disagree a little bit. That's okay.
God bless you, Professor.
Bless you.
I think I got a quote. What I'm trying to say, and this is something that your chair from your party said too as well. Being mad at another country for being communist is like being mad at your neighbor for being gay. It makes no sense. And I think whatever type of government they're doing, whatever's going on, they have a right to defend themselves, despite them being over authoritarian. That's up for the people to decide.
I get that. I don't agree with that analogy, but I completely understand the point.
Gotcha.
Well, and you can also make the point that the U.S. policy made Russia more authoritarian because they have cracked down on anti-war, war climate. Governments in general become more oppressive. And
That
same
may
with
well
China.
be. I don't think that that's a major factor, but I agree with you that it could well be a factor. Whereas I do not believe it is the case that, some guy living in his house being, strangely homophobic is going to make his neighbor more gay. Like, that doesn't work. The analogy breaks down pretty quick.
You got it. You got you good, Professor? Make sure your microphone's on and get it closer to you. Is your microphone on?
Well, I mean, we can debate. I don't disagree with this point. I mean, I do think U.S. foreign policy sometimes brings out the worst. And so, when a country is threatened with attack, whether it's Russia, if the U.S. is, arming Ukraine and attacking Eastern Ukraine, and they feel threatened, they go into a kind of war mentality. I mean, you can say the same with North Korea, with Cuba, with a country in Latin America. I mean, if the U.S. is attacking them, they become paranoid that they're under attack. Like Venezuela, they start to develop more authoritarian features. So I think you could make that argument against U.S. foreign policy, even from a libertarian point of view, that this is a reason, if we want to genuinely promote democracy, the way to do it is not to threaten these countries and initiate color revolutions or wars on them. They're going to become more authoritarian in that context.
I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right. And directionally speaking, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I would just invite you to not use certain words because it's going to undermine my ability to agree with you. When you say attack, that means different things to different people. The U.S. federal government did not launch a military intervention of Moscow. Okay, that's something that didn't happen, right? So
there's weapons that are coming from the U.S. right now hitting Moscow. There was cluster bombs on a beach in Crimea that came from U.S. weapons. If you're providing the weapons to these countries,
absolutely.
If they're
and
like
I agree
US,
with you, but I think that we need to be careful about the words that we choose because we undermine other people's ability to agree with us.
Yeah. And I would just add, I agree with you. Like what the U.S. is doing, I think is pernicious. And I think that libertarian oppose things like the NED, supporting opposition candidates. And that would compel a government to start cracking down on the opposition because they believe it's financed from foreigners. So that's where I fully agree with your party that the government should stop doing that. And that's not harnessing democracy, but authoritarianism in many countries.
Yeah, I just want to say too as well, really quickly, Mike. I love this discussion because at the end of the day, it's almost like the discussion I had with Thomas Massey at the Libertarian Convention. He disagrees with me with my theory, saying that our foreign policy is what's leading to migration. However, even though we have that strong disagreement, I know right now Mike ter Maat, Thomas Massey will pull sanctions, doesn't want to have sanctions, doesn't want to have interference. So at the end of the day, we're tactically going to pull the same move. It's a non-interventionist move. I just wanted to point it out. Mike, please go right ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's all good. Your immigration example, we don't have to get into immigration right now if you don't want to, but immigration is another example where I think that we need to recognize what the first order effects are before we start arguing about what the second order effects are. The first most important reason that people want to move to the United States is because we've got a great way of life, a great culture, a great economy. We represent opportunity. We represent multiculturalism. We represent a lot of good things. In fact, if someone were living outside the United States and they said they didn't want to come to the United States, the first thing I would ask is, how come?
Okay. Well, we disagree there too as well. I think that's the second kind of the reason. The number one reason is because the foreign policy apparatus is turning those countries into destabilization zones of sorts, where we're extracting all their resources for pennies on the dollar. And that's why they make the trip here, because they're following their stuff that was taken out of the ground in their own country. And the safest place is behind the gun. And then, therefore, they can be taken advantage when they come to this country for in labor, right? For cheap wages.
What you say is true, but it's not the most important reason why the Mexico economy stinks.
The Mexico economy doesn't stink. The Mexico economy voted for that party because they didn't have crazy hyperinflation.
The Mexican economy has stunk for 100 years.
But you got to understand, they raised the bottom of all the poorest people in those countries up to a living wage, up to a way they can survive. Same thing with Nicaragua. Same thing that's been going on now in Venezuela after the sanctions and the blockade. They put themselves on the side of the poor, and that's why they get reelected. To just say that their economy is in shambles, it's just not telling the whole story. The infrastructure that's been built in those countries, Mexico and Nicaragua in particular, has allowed the poorest of the poor to now put food on the table and a roof over their heads. And that's just the truth. That's my personal opinion. But all right, listen.
That is true, but it's also true that their economy stinks and a lot of people don't want to live there anymore.
AMLO had to deport a bunch of people, a bunch of Americans, because they were sopping up stuff from Mexico City. We got about 5 minutes left. Let's play the Salazar clip because this is important. We'll tie it to immigration because I had down on the debate, right? First place, Chase Oliver. Second place, Mike ter Maat. But my favorite moment was when you talked about foreign policy and how great it is for this country. I thought it was awesome. But let's revisit. This is Representative Salazar in the Congress. Look at this attitude. And I don't care what you tell me, for whatever reason they come here. If we don't change this behavior by our Congress, especially these, what people refer to as gusanos, inside Florida, that are part of our Congress, nothing's going to ever change. This is Representative Salazar. Give me your opinions about it when you hear it, Mr. ter Maat.
Now, Nicaragua has become this platform for people to arrive to come to the United States. We're talking about 1,000 flights. Each person pays $10,000. You've had 300,000 people from all over right here. You have people coming from Morocco, from Senegal, from Libya, from India, from Kyrgyzstan, from Kazakhstan. You have 300,000 people coming to Nicaragua, and happens that 8 of them were terrorist members of ISIS. They wound up in New York.
All right, you can cut that.
So
she's going to go. All right, play right real quick. This last line.
Oh. What list would you put Ortega on?
Okay,
absolutely.
Here we go with the list. And, she goes back and forth. You can take it down and get us back on the screen, Jayme. But this, Mike, this is what I'm trying to say, Mr. ter Maat. This is the biggest problem when it comes to immigration and our foreign policy. Bottom line, we can't sit there and say that this guy's that guy's this. Ortega, let's put him on a list. There's no data backing up any of the stuff she's bringing out there right now. She's pretty much just throwing stuff out of her, you-know-what. And that's what Donald Trump and a lot of other people have been doing when it comes to immigration at the border. Nobody is talking about the elephant in the room, and that's our foreign policy. Please, your opinions.
Well, foreign policy matters to everything around the world. There's no question about it, but it's not the elephant in the room. It is perhaps a horse in the room. As I said before, the reason, and some people do talk about it in fairness to you, but the reason people come to the United States is because we've got a strong economy and a great way of life. That's just the simple fact. And the fact it remains to be, well, you may not like that, but it's still true.
Where's the data backing that fact? Do you have data backing that fact?
What, the American economy? Yes.
That people are coming here because it's the way of life, not escaping a desperate situation in their country. I just want to know if you have data because Vivek was also at your
yes, but both of those are the same thing in many ways. When you've got a crappy economy, I didn't know we were splitting that hair so thin. Yes, if you've got a crappy economy, you frequently end up with a lot of other public policy problems to go along with them, but a lot of economic problems as well. Look, as a police officer for most of the past 15 years, I was a cop for 11 and a half years until a couple years ago. I often said to my trainees, if you weren't a professional economist before becoming a cop will turn you into an economist because you see the effects of crappy public policy up close and personal. You see the effects of bad housing policy, bad zoning policy, crappy schools, the war on drugs, the world's most oppressive criminal justice system. Hello. You see all of these things play out in a milieu of bad public policy that is the reason why the United States has such persistent intergenerational poverty that is not unique to the United States, but certainly has an American set of characteristics and not something that would be predicted in the absence of bad public policy. I get all of that. And in many Latin American nations, you've got both crappy economy, bad local public policy, all mixed up. We can argue, 10 minutes from now, whether that all comes from the same place, as I believe that it does. But however you split that hair, yes, there is a lot of reason for people to want to come to the United States.
30 seconds left. We've had a fiery debate. This is the first section. We got one more section. Mike ter Maat, you got 30 seconds. What do you do to end this conflict, Russia, Ukraine? Go right ahead. 25 seconds.
You pressure them into a negotiated settlement. If you can't get out, we've got to get out unilaterally. That would break my heart. But we've got to do what we've got to do to separate ourselves from accepting responsibility for other people's wars.
That's Mike ter Maat, Libertarian candidate, with me and Jayme Kuzmarov talking about foreign policy. This is LOL. Perfect. Okay, that was the first segment. Jayme knows to break it up now too as well. We're going to talk economics now moving forward with Mike ter Maat. If you can take them down, then we're going to introduce them. And Jayme, you can fire away with the questions, and then I will piggyback off. We got about 24 minutes. Mike, are you good with that?
I'm good with that. If you guys need a break, I'm okay with that. You going to keep rolling?
Look at this guy. We need a break. I could talk to you for hours. Let's get this rolling. Here we go. Take them down, and I'll get started up real quick.
I don't know if it's completely fair to characterize all that as a fiery debate. I thought we were largely doing pretty well, but go ahead.
Yeah. We are, but to me, once again, I just think that libertarians, that my issues with them are economics, and they're married to their ideology sometimes. If most of the major corporations are sucking this stuff out of the grounds in Latin America and having color revolutions to push some of the most barbaric leaders of all time so they can keep those countries destabilized and extract all the resources themselves, Banana Republic, right? The Dole Jaquita, which was once the United Fruit Company. I don't see how anything else can be used as justification of why they are coming here, not just our way of life. I think the other ones I hear you, but I mean, this is where
okay, but that's an empirical matter. You were accusing. Do you want to record this? I don't know.
We're live. We're live.
Oh, great. I don't think that that's anything but an empirical matter. That doesn't mean we're wed to a philosophy or you're wed to a philosophy. You're just arguing with me about which is more important. We don't have data. You don't have data. I don't have data. Good polling and focus group data asking people, a full panoply of the reasons they're coming to the United States. We don't know exactly what the contributing factors were that made so many of these economies stink. They have been subject to an array of bad public policy, bad corporate behavior, corporations corruptly capturing governments historically. That's absolutely true. But none of your perception runs counter to philosophical libertarian underpinnings. We would agree with all of that.
Yeah. I do have data, right? We have how many coups, have been admitted by the CIA since World War II. And unfortunately,
73.
Yeah. And I've gone down to 7 Latin American countries in the last 3 years, and I've talked to the people. So I've been able to get a reason why. And the number one reason why they wanted what they want is national sovereignty. They want America out of their business. And that's whether they're conservatives or leftist or whatever they are. But listen, I want to get this section done. I know you're limited on your time. What's that?
Go ahead. And they should want that.
Yeah. Yeah. If we're out, if we're out of those countries, we don't have those bases there, right? The ones I saw on Honduras were scary in Tegucigalpa. I mean, 1,500 fucking American troops there. Excuse my French for cursing. But listen, I want to make sure we get into libertarian economics and we have this section and it gets on the radio. It's important. So let's take Mike down. I'm going to start the clock and we'll bring them up. Here we go. Welcome back to LOL, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep itself from crying. I am your host, Craig Pasta Jardula, and I am the captain here with the professor, my co-host, Jayme Kuzmarov. He is the professor at the Tulsa Community College, but he's also the author of many books, including Warmonger. Professor, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Let's bring in our guest, Jeremy, and let's fire right away. He is the Libertarian Vice President candidate. Mr. Mike ter Maat is joining the show today.
Wonderful to be with you. Thank you. I appreciate your time and the conversation.
Perfect.
Great.
Jeremy, if you can start right up, please.
Okay. Well, I was looking at your background. It was quite interesting that you worked in the White House as an economist, and then you transitioned to become a police officer. So maybe you can just say a bit more about your career trajectory, and then how your experiences as a police officer, impacted your views on the U.S. criminal justice system and some of the changes you would like to see implemented.
Sure. There was a long time between working for the White House and becoming a police officer. I worked for the White House back in 90, 91, 92. I spent another decade in Washington after that, advocating for greater competition in a deregulated environment in the financial services industries. And then I had my own business in executive education, events, and strategic consulting, mostly again for financial institutions and nonprofits. I've taught economics at 3 different universities. It was really a second career. I became a police officer at the age of 49. I worked on the road in Broward County, Florida for 11 years, from age 49 to 60. And yes, it did affect how I view the criminal justice system, of course, as it would anybody, right? I was a registered libertarian for that entire period. And I had a great experience. I found an agency that had a separate vice unit, so I didn't have to get all involved with the stuff that I personally consider stupid, like, prostitution stings and the war on drugs. So I had a really rewarding experience as a patrol officer. I was on the road the entire time. I never asked to come off the road with any sort of a desk job or anything like that. My view is that we do have the world's most oppressive criminal justice system. My view is that the war on drugs doesn't work as a practical matter. As a libertarian, I've got ethical problems with any government agency or anybody else telling you what you can or cannot do with your body. That's a ethical, values-laden proposition that I think is really problematic from the government's point of view. I don't like it at all. But as a practical matter, I think that if you were to give most police officers a lie detector test, they would tell you that they agree with me that the war on drugs just, as a practical matter, doesn't work. And I do believe that we need to fundamentally change in many ways how we hold police officers accountable. We need to make it look much more like other industries, which is to say differentiated pay, greater competition among agencies, better competition among officers, and greater transparency.
Interesting. If I could just add about the war on drugs, because I I had a background myself in criminology and published a book on the Vietnam and the war on drugs, and I've worked with some reform organizations. So what alternatives would you propose? And I've often agreed with the libertarian positions on the war on drugs. So what is your alternative to the war on drugs, and where do you see some promising avenues as far as some states moving forward from this era of the huge lockdowns?
In fairness, I don't see a great deal that's promising out of state governments at all, and I don't think it is a matter of making a proposal, right? I just don't think that this is an area where public policy has demonstrated. I don't think that public organizations, that governments, that the state has demonstrated that it's able to add value. And so I would not suggest that it's just a matter of tweaking public policy. I just don't think that anyone has made the case, either philosophically or as a practical matter, that the state has a role to play that would make us healthier and safer.
Mm-hmm.
I think
so you would legalize
likely.
Drugs?
What's that?
Would you legalize drugs?
I would stop making them illegal. Mm-hmm. I think that even our choice of words gives away how statist our thinking has become.
I have a question piggybacking to what you just talked about as far as, being a police officer in Florida and what you could witness. Is there a direct line from economics to crime? In other words, is there a direct line from poverty to crime? And if that is the case, because we have a situation here in LA, right? This kid, Johnny Wagner, got killed. He was on 162 episodes of General Hospital. But what people don't understand is that the entertainment business has been destroyed and the little guy can't make money anymore. There used to be a couple towns, Atwater Village and Los Feliz, where the grips, the camera guys, the craft service people, the art department, they used to buy houses there. But now they can't do that because the wages have been shot and they've had this NAFTA-like movement of the industry itself, leaving and going, making films and movies and TV shows in Canada and in Florida. And this kid got whacked. He got killed at 3 a.m. in the morning because somebody was trying to steal his catalytic converter. Now, my question is, why was a guy who was on 162 episodes of General Hospital need a bartending job nowadays? It used to not be like that. So can you explain to us what you witnessed from your time on the streets as a police officer, the direct connection between economics and crime?
But let's be careful about how we choose our anecdotes. He was killed by someone trying to steal his catalytic converter.
Yes.
That's the story. The story is not, what this poor guy's employment was who got shot, right?
He got killed by somebody who was desperate enough to kill him for a $200 piece of. I think that is the story, that somebody was so desperate and the times are so hard. The homeless number is growing, and especially in California.
Absolutely, that is the story, and there is a direct connection from economic despair to crime. There's no question about that. Economic despair not only directly affects the crime rate. We know that from not only intertemporal, from one time to another types of studies, but we know it from one community to the next, that greater, incomes typically reduces crime rates. That's just a first order, brute force, not very interesting observation, but it is true. But we also know that in communities in which not only is income lower, do you get a higher crime rate, but you also see that when communities' expectations of greater income, expectations of opportunity, anticipation of something greater in the future, when that gets undermined, this is a major contributor to crime. This is something that economists find very difficult to evaluate, of course. It's very hard to draw data around this, but it's my personal observation. And, I'm the last of millions who have made this observation. When you undermine the culture of a community, one that revolves around optimism in the future, when you undermine that, you massively contribute not only to crime, but a lot of other antisocial behaviors.
Really quick question. I'll hand it to the professor. Does the whole system need to be blown up, or you said it can't be tweaked? Are you implying that we need to blow this whole system up and start from scratch, kind of like the way I think healthcare should be done?
Healthcare, yes. The war on drugs, yes. Criminal justice in general needs profound change. But look, communities, people have a right to come together and form communities, decide that they want a criminal code. They have a right to decide how they want that to be enforced. My own view is that we need to do a much better job of forcing law enforcement agencies to behave in ways that more closely align with the community's underlying values. If that sounds like blowing the system up, then okay, I wouldn't characterize it as blowing it up.
You only sound like half a Marxist there, not a whole Marxist. Please, Professor, go ahead.
Well, maybe Marx, accidentally said something that correctly sounded like Mike ter Maat.
Yeah, he even said that but it was Marxists who once originally said that a underarmed, a disarmed public isn't very easy public to control. And he actually called for picking up arms for the people to protect themselves. Professor, please jump on in and just go right ahead.
Okay, well, I was going to ask just to explain so we have a better understanding of your platform of the Gold New Deal and also your views about the Federal Reserve and how we could replace it.
I appreciate that. The Gold New Deal is poking a little bit of fun at FDR's original New Deal. We believe, I firmly am convinced, that much of the legislation that came out of the New Deal imposed a relationship on us, between us and the federal government, that has not been economically healthy, and to such an extent that has undermined, to a certain extent, our, what I would call our financial culture. Having said that, I think that that needs to be fundamentally changed. Gold is the color of the Libertarian Party. That's why I call it a Gold New Deal. I'm also poking a little bit of fun at the Green New Deal from AOC. So you get all that. I believe that we need a very fundamentally different relationship. I believe that the federal government should not have the ability to undermine state governments' ability to chart their own political future. I don't like the financial tie to be direct from individuals to the federal government. I believe federal government should be required to go to states to raise money. We can all argue about how much money that is, but to the extent to which the federal government needs any, it should go to states to get it, and states ought to stand up for us and represent our interests. I also believe that the relationship between us and state governments needs to be fundamentally changed as well. I think that more decisions that affect our lives need to be pushed from the federal government to states, from states to localities, and in many cases from localities to individuals. That's what the Gold New Deal is all about.
Can you really quickly, Jayme, can you give a little bit more? Because I think a lot of people have this misconception too as well. Why do libertarians want so many of the policies or the laws to be made on a local level as opposed to a national level?
There are a couple different reasons. One is one is constitutional. That's the way the Constitution was set up, and we believe that that's worth honoring. But more importantly, I would suggest, we believe that decisions need to be made as close to the voter as possible so that the voter has more influence over these decisions. And I think that we also need to recognize that the United States is a big place and that there are going to be different cultures, in some cases subtly, in some cases profoundly, different cultures from state to state. I think that we also have to recognize that however you feel about government, sometimes government doesn't get it right. And so getting it wrong once and imposing it on 50 states is a lot worse than allowing states to make up their own mind, state legislatures, sometimes getting it wrong, sometimes getting it right, but more easily learning from each other and making better adjustments going forward.
Yeah. Professor?
Great. And the question about the Federal Reserve, your critique of it and how we could replace it or an alternative.
We need to recognize that, and let's start out by recognizing that most Americans have no idea how monetary policy in the United States is formed, right? I think most Americans would be shocked to learn that the most important price in the world, the short-term interest rate in the US dollar, is set by locking up 12 people in a room every 6 weeks and basically asking them what their mood is regarding the economy. That is not a metaphor. That's actually how it's done. I think if you told any normal human being on the streets of Pittsburgh, hey, did you know that the price of milk is set by a dozen people making up their minds in a collective mood swing every 6 weeks? They'd say some combination of, no, that can't be true. And if it were true, that's really stupid. And as it turns out, it is stupid. Research shows that we would have a much better chance of leaning against the boom bust cycle if we just had a simple, yes, Milton Friedman-like rule in place that says, no, the government or anybody else is not allowed to create money willy-nilly to the extent to which they think is in best alignment with their mood swing. It's not a good way to set monetary policy. And lo and behold, it turns out to be, as a practical matter, bad public policy. So I would take away from the Fed its ability to control monetary policy. I would replace it with a rules-based system. You don't have to go all the way back to a gold standard. Indeed, I wouldn't. But you do need a set of rules in place.
You know, he's telling you to go out there, ladies and gentlemen, and buy the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Please do so. Learn something. And listen, let me just say this much. If you want a lady to hit on you at the Libertarian convention, wear a shirt that says "End the Fed," and they'll come talk to you. Professor, ask your question about public schools, and then we'll talk a little shop at the end. We got about 8 minutes and 45 seconds left.
Okay, well, there's a lot we could discuss. Yeah, and I'm interested just to hear more of your view, like on unions and first unions, and then the issue of healthcare and public schools. How would a more decentralized model contribute to better education or healthcare? If you can briefly address the two.
Sure, a lot to unpack there. Look,
Yeah.
Unions are a natural economic phenomenon, just like corporations are. No one is suggesting that you don't have the right to form a corporation. You don't have the right to form a union. I am not going to make any argument that anything the federal government or even state governments have done in the past 200 years has advanced the interests of the American people in terms of how corporations behave or how unions behave. I think a more deregulated environment for both of them would probably be a good idea. In the case of public sector unions, which are with whom I am most familiar, having been a member, right, of the police union in Broward County, a couple of them, because we would change unions from time to time. My belief is that they do not do a good job of representing the interests of police officers and other public sector employees. I think it is because they don't understand economics. They don't understand that competition in the long run would increase incomes for their membership. They have very, very short run interests, and they act upon them very effectively. I think that's a huge problem. It doesn't mean I would pass a law that says, they can't operate. I just think that they don't do a very good job of it. But I would say that about a whole lot of corporations as well. Regarding schools, I'll give you a chance to react to that as well. Regarding schools, I just don't think that there's any logical reason. There's no economic reason. There's no educational reason to suggest that the way that we should be spending money on primary and secondary education is that we determine that there's only, one school in your area to whom we're going to give the money. Love it or shove it. We don't care how poorly or well they do in terms of this decision. We're going to keep giving them the money anyway, and we're not going to have a competitive process. That just doesn't make any sense. There is no economist who would argue if you were going to start from scratch, right? You wouldn't design a system like that for any product in the world. You wouldn't decide, well, you're only going to, have one bakery in your community and we're going to give all the money to them. And if you want to go to a different bakery, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. But if you come to our anointed bakery, you're going to get it for free. That's not it's almost silly on its face. And of course, lo and behold, you get crappy results, either by the standards internationally or by the standards of comparison to other corporate industrial sectors in the United States. People are frustrated with public schools and with education in general, and I believe that they should be. One of the ways you see that is the stark difference between public school systems in one state versus another, which is problematic, but at least, it's one of those things that illustrates it. So I do believe that we would be well served to get the government in the long run out of the idea of financing public education, but at the very least, get the government out of deciding which school you're allowed to go to with that money.
It's interesting.
But if the government gets out of it, how will people who can't afford a school be able to send their kids to a good school?
In the long run, I believe that many communities will decide to allow government, however you define, whether it's an HOA or a town or a county or a school district or what have you. I think a lot of communities will, in the long run, decide to keep some form of public, whatever public means, right? But some communal decisions will be made on how to finance the education of children. That's 4 generations away. That's an early 22nd century type of decision. I think what's facing us today is, why is it that given we allow the public sector to raise money, why is it we also allow them to decide where you can spend that money? I think that that's nothing short of weird from an economic perspective.
It's a quagmire for leftists like me and Jeremy, because we understand that you want to defang the government, which has so much waste, and it seems like every single time they get involved, it's another Ponzi scheme, and that's what I think what's going on in Ukraine, right? This is a money laundering scheme more than anything, and that's why I have my stances on it. But I understand where you guys are coming from. Let's talk a little shop, because we got about 3 minutes and 20 seconds left. One of the first questions, and it's kind of along the same lines, right? Okay, we want to defang the government. We don't want them making decisions. I asked Chase Oliver, and I caught him like maybe 2 minutes after he won that nomination on the floor. And I asked him, would he ban gain of function on day one? And like a good libertarian, he said he wouldn't ban anything on day one. Especially he said he would kick it to the private sector and let them decide. I understand the mentality behind that, but with something like gain of function that could possibly wipe out the majority of the people on this planet, don't you think that government has some roles to play? I mean, obviously, they've gone the wrong way on this one. They've been actually, promoting gain of function, but ideologically, shouldn't we put restraints on stuff like gain of function?
Potentially, yes. But it depends. There are some technical matters that I probably am not qualified to understand, but let me speak to it philosophically. I'm not a chemist, right? I'm not a doctor. But for example, if it turns out to be true, as I suspect that it will, that COVID-19 escaped from a laboratory, right? That it was either man-made or humanly accelerated and escaped from a laboratory, as I believe in due course we will learn, then that profoundly suggests that there are important externalities to the creation of these things. And in that sense, yes, there is a potentially a public sector role. I don't think we're there yet. And to your point, yes, the government's been going 180 degrees the other way by creating them and then fostering them, holding them in a laboratory controlled by a government that locked out good oversight. And so, yeah, it probably escaped from a laboratory in this environment. It's 180 degrees in the wrong. We agree with that. The second order question of, and should we allow private sector organizations to do this? I suspect the answer probably is yes, we should allow private sector organizations to do that, but I'm open to the idea that there may be just externalities there that are difficult to control. I think that in fairness, is a technical matter.
Yeah, we have about 30 seconds left. We're here with Mike ter Maat. Mike, can you give us your really quick 25-second answer on why you went with Chase Oliver? There was a lot of people at the convention who said that you were supposed to partner up with Rechtenwald, but you went with Chase. Is there any reason why? You got 15 seconds.
Well, to correct the record, I wasn't supposed by anyone to go with Michael Rechtenwald. I had indicated to Michael that I expected to support him, but there was no deal. There was no quid pro quo or anything like that. It's just that Michael and I had been on the same page regarding a number of issues. Chase Oliver demonstrated not only to have the right strategy over the last 2 weeks, but to have the right skill set over the last 24 hours. I'll let convention goers plummet the depths of the implications of that statement on their own. But it became clear that Chase was the right guy at the right time with the right strategy and the right skill set that made best sense for the Libertarian Party. And I would also hasten to add that at that penultimate moment of decision, I offered the Mises Caucus the opportunity to work with Chase directly and cut me out of it, and they declined.
That's Mike ter Maat from the Libertarian Party. He is the vice presidential candidate. We thank you so much, Michael, for coming on the show.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
All right. So Jayme, we're gonna have to try to figure that out. I think we went about 35 seconds over, so we'll have to figure that out.
I apologize.
No, that was my fault because I waited and stuff. But if
you might have 35 seconds in the front when I was making a fool of myself that you can edit out.
Jeremy, do you have any final questions while we're still live here with Mike ter Maat, or are you good?
Well, it's a great discussion. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you say, and I learned a lot from hearing your positions. So, I think we share a view on intervention that you would cut the military budget how much, like 50%, or
dramatically. I don't know that I could put a number on it, but I would argue that I would find it highly unlikely that we should preserve most of the defense budget. I think most of it we would cut.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about this new thing called Agenda 2025 that the Democrats all of a sudden seem to be obsessed with? I mean, Biden has done so bad that they're looking for something to pivot to something else to blame the Heritage Foundation about. What are your thoughts on Agenda 2025?
I haven't read Agenda 25. This is the Heritage Foundation agenda. Look, the Heritage Foundation, to be fair as I can be, right? The Heritage Foundation has done a good job of analyzing many issues from a conservative point of view. In terms of, social issues, there have been precious few examples in which I've been in agreement with the Heritage Foundation. I recognize that. So I'm not going to be able to convince you or your audience or anybody else that Heritage and I have been on the same page. But when it comes to economic issues, I do appreciate their non-interventionist attitude. And I think that that's very valuable. Regarding foreign policy, they are typically quite interventionist. And so I haven't read it, but I wouldn't be optimistic.
Mike, let everybody know where they can find you, where they can get more involved, learn more about you. And if they really like you, give you a few bucks to help you out on the campaign trail.
Or if you have money that's just pissing you off and you got to get rid of it, right? Well,
you really want to stick it to the establishment, give Mike your money.
I think that's a marvelous idea. Like you can go to MikeTerMaat.com, which is tricky to spell because it's got 2 A's in ter Maat. You can go to goldnewdeal.org and read about the platform. That's actually a little bit more fun. But for the best fun for the dollar, you should be going to libertarianintelligence.org and visit Lisa, the Libertarian AI bot. That is a good, if you're a nerd and interested at all in libertarianism, that's as much fun as an afternoon can get.
Yeah. Mike, I don't want to dive too deep into this really quickly, and you're getting out of here right now, but you did mention something, right, about what happened on the convention floor, that you offered the opportunity for them to work directly with the Mises Caucus. I haven't really come out too publicly. I've made insinuations that the way they've handled coming out of this convention it could cost them in the long run. In other words, I feel that people who wanted to see Rechtenwald because they didn't necessarily get their chosen choice in Dave Smith. What I'm trying to say is that I think that in this particular situation, it would have been best for them to put their head down, walk on over, shake hands, keep the party together, and move on and do things right next time. Do things better next time if you want your candidate of choice to be chosen. Do you think that the Libertarian Party is going to survive this little kind of mesh up? Because there's a lot of people who are saying that we now have a party that's really not united in the Libertarian Party because they're not happy. The majority of the people within that party are not happy with their choice for president. How do they come out of this and repair things so that in 4 years from now, they've got a strong candidate that's on the ticket, a populist name? Right now, I got to really point out my friend Spike Cohen. I think he should have ran. I just think he was well known, and really it's about carrying that ballot access moving forward, building the Libertarian Party as a whole. How do you repair these damages that have been done coming out of the convention?
It's not easy. It's not easy. Nothing that you have said is untrue, including Spike. I do hope that Spike runs in 2028. I think that he would be good for the party. I think that the party needs to unify. I have done a great deal of consulting work for nonprofit organizations. And I can tell you that when whether it's political or not, when a nonprofit loses focus on one singular unifying objective, this is why for-profit corporations have an easier time controlling their culture, because they're all focused on making money. That's it, love it or shove it, right? When a nonprofit loses its focus on one thematic objective on which everybody agrees, people's heads wander around. That's where infighting comes from. That's the Libertarian Party. We are not a group of people who agree on what the overall objective is for the party. This is the fundamental problem. It is a party of activists rather than a party that is politically motivated, right? A party of candidates and campaigns and politicians. I'm not suggesting one thing is good or one thing is bad. What I am suggesting is that until and unless you come to some sort of agreement, this is what will naturally, inevitably, and always result. So the only way to fix it, and I'm not suggesting it's easy, just because it's easy to describe doesn't mean it's easy to do. The only way to fix it is to get the party to agree that we want to run a presidential campaign to actually win. And winning might look like different things to different people. You don't have to suggest that it's all about, gaining the White House, ride or die, and, we all suck if we don't achieve that one singular objective. But if you do not commit yourself to that and everything that comes off of that, everything that benefits from that, from ballot access to statewide campaigns doing better to better branding for the party, if you're not committed to all of that as a singular thematic objective, you're never going to bring the party together.
Listen, Jayme, make sure we get that last part clipped out, and I'll put it on my Twitter. Mike ter Maat, thank you so much. Listen, right now, I don't think your job, obviously, I think if I'm pretty sure that you don't, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't think you got a really good shot of winning, right? The Libertarian Party of winning the ticket. But I think that your job is to serve, to make sure you keep that ballot access moving forward, to get the libertarian message out there. What's really bothering me is that I'm a leftist, and some of Chase Oliver's views, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want you to speak for the guy, but his views are different than his ideology. So his views on the LGBT community might be this, but his ideology is what he's going to go with, and that is parents. Parents make the ultimate decision for their children. That's just a libertarian value. So to me, to see some of this lip coming out of some of the members from the Libertarian Party, I just want to go and smack them on the side of the head. And they're friends of mine over here. It's like, dude, what is wrong with you? This is your party. You actually have a mechanism where the people can hold power. That process in which you chose the president and the vice president, I was about to cry, because I've been to many Democratic conventions and we don't have that over there. You already know who's chosen when you're walking into those Democratic conventions. You didn't know who was going to be chosen when you're walking into the Libertarian convention. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
A great pleasure to be with you. Thank you. You guys are a lot of fun.
And come back again and we'll set you straight on Ukraine, Russia again, like we did this time. We do appreciate it.
I think we're in agreement there. We just, we're talking about a cup that's half empty, half full, and 3/4 black and 1/4 creamy color.
I still think you're married to your ideology, that you can't, central planning is no good for you guys. Well, I'm a leftist libertarian that believes in civil liberties, freedom of speech, anti-interventionism, but I believe that we can play nicely in the sandbox. And I know a lot of libertarians with their economics, they hate central planning. They hate overreach by a government. And I understand how we can kind of knock heads on ideology. But I think you're
We
a
agree.
great
We
vice
agree on
presidential
all of
candidate, by the
that.
way.
That doesn't mean we need a 5-year plan.
Nah, true. Come back and we'll have some more fun later on, ladies and gentlemen. Mike ter Maat, Libertarian vice presidential candidate. We love him. Thank you so much, brother. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Professor, let me get you over here. Why are you so blurry? What is going on with your camera? Is your camera blurry today, or
Am
you
I
have your
blurry?
camera plugged in?
Maybe that was the issue. Is it?
Have you heard anything about Agenda 2025?
I have heard about it. Yeah, it was discussed there was an article about it in the Nation magazine, and I didn't. I've got it somewhere here. I didn't read it that carefully, but I know it's some blueprint for right-wing government. But I agree. I mean, maybe they're using this as a kind of scare tactic that, oh my God, I mean, the Democrats have nothing right now. I mean, their candidate is heading, is not much longer for this earth, sadly, and you got, it looks like Parkinson's disease. So I mean, we're in uncharted territory there. I mean, and beside it, it's been just a catastrophic presidency. So I mean, they have nothing to run, nothing to offer the American people. So I think it's natural that they're going to try and scare people into voting for them. Now, I mean, there may be some truth to it, though. On the other hand, I mean, you and I wouldn't agree with a lot of the Republican Party agenda, what they want to do as far as privatizing, Social Security or cuts to social programs. So the war with China. I mean, foreign policy. Biden been a super hawk, but the GOP really wants to take on the Chinese, and I think that's part of Agenda 2025. So there are some scary features about it.
I think that's the most pressing point. The fact that it's the Heritage Foundation, they suck on foreign policy. And once again, I think they're desperate. The Democrats, the mainstream media, they have nothing else to go on, nothing positive to promote from their candidate and their side. So they have to go back to doing what they normally do. And that's just attack their opponent. And that's what they're doing right now. They're desperate. So they've kind of clinging on to this whole Heritage Foundation situation. Listen, Jeremy, thank you so much.
It is an ominous report, so it's not the kind of government you and I want. So,
yeah, Jeremy, we're getting out of here. That's it for today. We'll be back later on, guys. We love you. Thank you so much. Pasta to go. We'll be here at 3:15. I'm going on the backstory in about 40 minutes. I am Craig Pasta Jardula. All the links down below to help us out. You want to join the Patreon? We got some cooking videos out there. I want to thank Jayme CheeseSlice on the ones and twos. Do we have any super chats, super rays, or anything like that? One. What is it? I think Mike ter Maat wants to just, not go on the campaign trail and just join the show instead and campaign from the combo couch and from the Pasta to go. Where's that super chat? Gregory Walker, between state and Fed, who is the floor and who is the ceiling? Like taxes, for example, if you pay state tax in your state, does some of that go to the Fed, or does the federal government set a baseline for all states to tax? I don't know. That's a good question. I think every state is different. I think they try to clarify what goes to state, what goes to federal. Now, I will tell you this much. 75% of all federal taxes do go to the war machine. Am I right on that, Professor?
Yeah, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's a very high percentage. Yeah.
It's basic math. If the majority of our budget's going to the war machine, the majority of our taxes are going to the war machine. Guys, that's it for today. Craig Pasta Jardul. We'll be back in a little bit. All the links are down below. Like I said, I'm here with Jeremy Kuzmarov, Jayme CheeseSlice on the ones and twos. We love you. We'll see you in a little bit. We're saving the world one meal at a time. But right now, it's time for Pasta to go.